Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Reggie Turner and Henry House. The FlipSide starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the show. So President Trump announced last week that he was going to suspend TikTok. Now TikTok says they may have legal action. Reggie, what are your thoughts?
I think the president is using his bully pulpit to move the needle on TikTok. I believe that, there are legitimate concerns in regards to China using U.S. data, so there are some national security issues there. I think that's a tricky one there, because you have a situation where the Chinese could start doing the same thing to U.S. companies by pushing the needle in the bully pulpit, and I don't believe that would benefit either country. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. It looks like Twitter and also Microsoft are kind of the leading candidates to buy it out, but with the shotgun marriage, you're also devaluing the company a bit by having this forced marriage.
Well, that's true. Henry?
Well, the Senate and the House have already passed resolutions that it's not supposed to be on any U.S. government device.
Okay.
So there is a legitimate,
but
there is a security concern, and
But is that security concern? Is that the only application they've blocked? I would venture to guess no.
No, because they also blocked Chinese manufactured GPS watches that track your fitness, because soldiers would be wearing these out on secure bases, and they're out there just getting their exercise in, and they're giving them the perimeter of where a base is. So it's not the only thing. I think the timing's interesting, because Microsoft said, oh, well, we think we probably can come up with some kind of agreement with TikTok by September 15th, and it's September 20th that this will go into effect. So is Trump playing the market to lower the value of a company from his bully pulpit? And it doesn't make any difference whether it's a Republican or a Democrat sitting in the office. There are certain powers that executive orders give them, and certain times I think they overreach.
Do you think he's overreaching?
I think in this stead, I think we should let Congress take it up first.
Okay. Reggie, do you think he's overreaching?
It's hard to say if he's overreaching, because sometimes it's just rhetoric. And, he very well could just be using the rhetoric to move the needle. And obviously, there are negotiations that are happening, with some companies that may force the issue. I just think that it's a dangerous precedent that's being set, because if the same thing is done to U.S. companies that are doing business in China, then that could have a detrimental effect on our markets as well.
Okay. Henry, a security issue. Do you see a valid security issue? And clearly we're not in the know about that, but do you see, is there a basis for that?
I think the market's targeted to people who are probably our children, okay, that are sitting around this table, okay? It's targeting towards the teenagers, and I say the 20-somethings.
And so was Facebook.
And so was Facebook, and then the grandparents got on Facebook, and the kids abandoned it.
And the grandparents now got on Twitter.
Yep, and the kids are trying to mass exodus that too.
Right, well, and now they're on TikTok.
They're on TikTok, so,
right. The young people call the older people on TikTok, anyone, I believe, over 30, but don't quote me on this, as boomers.
Okay. There we go.
You, Henry, are a boomer.
I will own that badge. Okay.
So.
But the security concerns, what type of access not only does it have regarding what your GPS information is, but what kind of access is that gaining on your phone? When I was out with my wife on vacation, every time her phone was popping up, when we punched it in for navigation, it popped up the last 5 locations that she may have been to. I'm like, why do you have that activated on your phone? Google was tracking every place that we had been and making recommendations on, do I want to go back to where I had been? TikTok is going to access your videos, is going to access your pictures. How much more access is it going to have? How much information do we store on our phone? That's really the question. Do we store our credit card information on our phone? Do we store locations of where we've been, where we go, and et cetera on our phone? Do we have all of our contacts on our phone? Yes. And all this is potential to be hijacked by a company which we have very little control or influence with.
Politically, is there an upside to this for President Trump? Because clearly, in my view, he's going to lose a lot of the younger voters just simply by this.
I think it fits into him saying that he's being tough on China.
Okay.
So I think that for those that message resonates with, that further enforces.
Do you think this is politically motivated?
I can't say it's politically motivated in totality, because I believe that there are some serious issues, not just with Chinese companies, but also with U.S. companies and how they collect and mine our data. I believe that's an issue that we still haven't solved with legislation as of yet. So I think there are some serious issues there. And I think the executive order was to really just push the issue forward to force action.
Do you think that Trump is going to, if he feels that there's a pending coming together of TikTok with either Microsoft or Twitter or company to be named later, do you think he's going to move that deadline from the September 20th down and kick the can down? So there's an opportunity to try to resolve this without the executive order going in place.
I believe his administration will push him towards that, to allow that deal to get done, because then he can champion that as a win.
But by the same token, there's, at least in my view, there's not a lot where he doesn't follow his own advice more than, or his own thought processes rather than those that are around him. I mean, how many, again, for him or against him, there's no doubt that he's gone through more secretaries and senior staff than probably the last three presidents combined.
I just think that if he goes through the executive order, there's more risk than there is upside, because of the damage if China starts to reciprocate in doing that to U.S. companies.
But even in this regard, we're looking at an election essentially a month and a half from then. Very easily, well, TikTok files a suit against Trump's order. It's not going to be heard.
Well,
and he's going to look strong all the way through the election by standing up to it.
He's going to look strong to those who find that as a reason to vote
and
for
the people who
something.
are TikTok, are they Trump? Are they a large contingent of the Trump base?
I may be wrong, but I would be willing to bet with this president in particular that those that are for him are going to be for him no matter what comes out about him, and those that are against him are going to be against him no matter what comes out about him. And I would have said the same thing about Barack Obama. The last two presidents, in my view, have had very polarized audiences, either for or against them.
And that's the trouble with our nation.
I don't think TikTok is going to move votes.
No,
I don't think they are. I don't think anything is. I don't think lawn signs are. How much money do they spend on these lawn signs, whether it's nationally or locally? And the people that are really against them will go steal the lawn signs. We've seen that happen. Or in the case of
they tag them.
A former candidate, they put a Pirates. Ryan Miner was running for Board of Education, and there was a lawn sign not on my property, but on a property down the road, and they put an eye patch to make him. They dressed him up like a pirate on this lawn sign, which and I've seen several Trump signs and Biden signs that maybe they just fell over by themselves, but given that they were on metal poles and the entire metal pole was sticking out of the ground, and they were laying on their face.
Well, maybe they had the lawn person come by and mow their yard, and that's why they're laying down.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
So let's talk about the lawsuit. Again, at the basis of this lawsuit is whether he exceeded his executive power. And in my mind, reading what I have read, it seems like those powers are fairly broad. Thoughts?
Well, his predecessor challenged the way the executive order was interpreted. And Trump, though he campaigned that he wasn't going to governed by executive order.
He's done pretty well with that, hasn't he?
He's certainly exercising the pen and paper on the executive order. I think you can agree.
I've got a phone and I've got a pen is what Barack Obama said.
Exactly.
Obviously, so does Trump.
I think there needs to be an evaluation of where the presidential powers end with executive orders. Can they suspend previous executive orders? Yeah, that would make sense. But can they put items into law or into policy that your Congress doesn't support? I think that kind of circumvents the reason why we have separated powers in our government.
Is it possible for a foreign government who is, by most accounts, an adversary, to get a fair trial in the United States?
You would like to think yes. But is it going to be a jury? No, it's probably just going to be the judge sitting there and hearing. So I think when you look at that evaluation, I think there's a stronger chance of them getting possibly a more favorable, depending on who appointed that federal judge into the seat, getting a more favorable opinion or unfavorable opinion, depending on what jurisdiction that case is heard.
So potentially, in your view, it might boil down to the political leanings of the judge that is hearing the case.
Sadly, yes.
It would be my hope that it doesn't come down to this lawsuit. I would hope that it can get resolved without it, because again, my concern is the precedents that this would set and the retaliation that could happen to U.S. businesses.
Well, and the problem with that, and I agree with you 100% on that. And the problem in my mind, and I hadn't pursued that in my thoughts. The problem I see with it is it could be far beyond just the software application providers. It could be any business that is selling things to China, and all of a sudden China says no.
Well, I think this is a game of one-upmanship. Remember when we were kids and we would play baseball and we have a baseball bat and take the hand and try to get it right to the top of the knob? This is Trump playing China, and they're each trying to see who's going. So if Trump right now has the upper hand, China's going. Well, Trump already has the next 2 or 3 plays down the road that he's going to put in place immediately when China retaliates, and everything makes him look stronger to the people that he wants to look strong to. So I think he's playing the long game.
Well, I think it's a long game, and I think, politically, I don't frankly see the upside, because I think if you look at his base, it's more the older generation, and if he needs to bring more people into his base to get reelected, I don't think this is the way to do it. But I hope that he doesn't. I also hope equally that he's not using our relationship with foreign entities to try to drive a win to an election. I think that's not what our president should do.
Well, Wall Street hasn't gotten spooked yet. But if the market moves and speaks, then that will force him to move.
Market's been looking pretty good recently, hasn't it?
It has been in the short term.
Okay.
All right. That's all the time we have on that. Coming up next, jobless rates fell in July, but there are several, including Peter Francho, who is our comptroller, and the Maryland Chamber of Commerce president, who are very worried about the job outlook and stimulus. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So COVID has caused some serious unemployment. I think that most of us can agree on that. However, some are suggesting that we've hit a bright spot as unemployment in July fell to 10.2%. Henry, what say you?
We're seeing the unemployment decrease because we're seeing businesses open. But I really get down to the point where we're standing right now. Why has Maryland not gone to stage 3 of the reopening process? There are more people that we could be putting in, getting them back to work. Why are we not getting that money contributed back into our economy? I've been out to restaurants. I'm trying to patronize the locally owned businesses, but there's some businesses who just simply are not going to reopen because they've been closed too long and they've incurred too much debt and they don't have enough capital reserves to open. And I'm not saying we have to influx cash from the federal government and go into deeper debt to try to sustain these businesses. It's an unprecedented loss, and it's unfortunate that we are there. But when you have the comptroller of Maryland saying, "Well, we need more money," well, dude, I'm sorry, you've had 4 months to plan for more fiscal responsibility. Why do we need to keep putting influx of money into the economy and increasing the burden not just for us, not just for our children, but for our grandchildren with the amount of debt that we're incurring, which is going to buckle our entire national economy if we don't address it sooner?
So your point, to narrow it down, is that 10.2 is a step forward, but it could be lower than that if we would.
I honestly think if we got back to turning the lights on for predominantly all the businesses, we could be down somewhere in the 8% range. We're going to have businesses that just aren't going to reopen. That's contributing to it. But we also have, we were 3.9% or something at the beginning of the year?
3.5% in February.
Essentially, it was zero on unemployment. There's just, roughly 4% of the populace that is not gainfully employable. Are we going to be back there? We could be back there in 18 months. I don't think we're going to be there next month, even if we wiped out all the restrictions that we have on businesses, because some businesses are just, they have burdens on them right now. And the owners are working where they formerly had employees working, and they've discovered how to do more work with less people. And it's increasing the burdens and the stress on the workers. But they're finding a way to try to make money or at least break even during this challenging time.
On the flip side of that argument are those that would say, well, if we open, then we're going to be like other states that opened too early and they saw their COVID numbers spike significantly, something that we haven't seen. Reggie, how do you balance those two in your mind?
Well, the great thing is I'm not serving, so I don't have to be a part of those tough decisions, first and foremost. But it is a tough balancing act, because I think that even if we did open up more, it doesn't mean that the consumer is going to come back. Because, we as a country, a lot of us don't have confidence in the information that we're receiving. So when you don't have that trust in your local, state, and federal government and how they're executing, business can open the doors, but are we going to go back? Are we going to consume at the same levels right now? I think that everyone's kind of hunkering down. I mean, I have had an outdoor meal or two, but I have been very selective in regards to how I have moved. I mean, my spending habits have changed. So for the consumer to come back to fuel the economy the way that we have, I think it's going to be a long process, because there's a psychological component to it I don't believe that we've fully addressed.
I think you're right, and I think the other interesting piece of that is our habits have changed. Whether or not we're willing to go out, the fact of the matter is, and I've seen on, for example, social media, a lot more people posting recipes that they learned how to make during COVID, and they're now really happy to do this food in-house, and maybe not. And I see the restaurants that have opened. Not one of the restaurants that I've been to that have reopened have the same level of hours that they had pre-COVID. And many of them have a reduced menu. So I think, they say it takes doing something 12 times to make a habit. Well, guess what? We've stayed home for a lot more than 12 days. So I think that's the other interesting thing that we have to combat here. And to your very first point, you don't have to make that decision. I mean, it's a no-win decision, in my view. Because it doesn't matter where you are, and you could be either place, somebody's going to be wrong, and there's no way, at this point, in my view, to predict who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong.
And, when you have, some of the southern states that open up and they've seen the spike, were they going to see a spike anyway? Because because they never had the spike that New York experienced, that we did have a spike here. We're on the other side of the curve right now. Hopefully it stays that way. So it's tough decisions, but you have certain segments of the state that have a lot lower rate than other parts. Okay, maybe the Central Corridor needs to have more restrictions on them. Baltimore City has a greater restriction on restaurants than what we have where we're at. So maybe it makes sense to have a a local input as to whether your community is ready to open. And, could that help? But, unemployment numbers, we're still going to have what we term high unemployment because we really were spoiled over the last, year and a half of having extremely low unemployment. So we're still going to have high unemployment by that basis. Are we going to have competitive unemployment? Are employees going to start to be able to pick and choose again like they did, 6 months ago? I don't think we're there for probably a couple years. If the economy recovers from all the burden that we've taken on and doling out money. The important thing is, talking about the unemployment benefits, making sure that they are there as unemployment benefits. I don't think we need to look at the additional stipend of unemployment benefits. Again, I get back to my argument. You've had 4 months of this. You work with your lenders, work with your car loan, work with your mortgage company, and say, they understand the situation. Maybe they put a deferment on it and move it to the back end of the note, but work with them. If you're out ahead of the curve, then hopefully you don't get behind and buried. But there's a lot of stresses that are going on, and it's not just because, you have kids who may not be going back to the classroom the way you're used to it. There's a lot of stresses going on your family budget because the income's not the same, even if you have a regular job. I think both of you gentlemen mentioned, I'm not doing the things the way I used to do them. So that impacts how you're doing things. All of it is a drastic change, but we can't keep throwing money at a problem until we can draft what is our solution and how we're going to get out of it. And Chamber of Commerce is asking for money, the state of Maryland's asking for money, and we do have a balanced budget in the state. Maybe we have to look at curtailing some of the programs or deferring repairs on items for the time being until we can start getting that revenue stream back into where it needs to be.
At the end of the day, though, all of that affects individuals' ability to spend money. I mean, whether it's the lessee that can't pay the rental unit on his apartment, or which makes the lessor not be able to pay his mortgage payment to the bank, then the bank has to potentially lay off people. So, in my mind, it's a trade-off of at what level.
But I seem to recall, what was about 12 years ago, there was a huge bailout on a lot of these banks that incurred a massive amount of federal debt to help bail them out. I think the banks could take one for the people who have loans and slide it to the backside.
Well, we saw through PPP that wasn't the case.
That's right.
That's true.
I think that consumers are voting with their wallets. One of the things that I looked at is one of the top performing sectors over the past 3 and 6 months was home electronics. So people are making their homes their castles.
Yes.
Because they're saying, no, we're gonna stay in.
And also, by the way, weights and workout equipment.
Well, you can't find that. You
can't get a Peloton.
No, you can't.
No, but interesting thing, a home improvement store. I was talking to a person there, and this was about a month ago. That home improvement store did 50,000 covers in one day. 50,000. That's more than the population of the city of Hagerstown. 50,000 customers went through that store and made a purchase in one day. What does that say? We're trying to find stuff. Yes, we're trying to make, I mentioned before the show, I'm doing a little home improvement project. We're trying to find things to stay busy. We're spending money if we have it. I would encourage, if you don't have the money to spend, don't ring up in your credit card because you don't know how long this may last. But at the same point, I think people want to get out there and start doing things, and I think you're going to see kind of a rubber band snap back into the economy that as soon as restrictions are eased, people are going to jump at the opportunity to be free Americans.
But the other thing that worries me is I think we're artificially hiding the problem that is going to hit us in the face if COVID doesn't go away as quickly as we hope, because we've inflated the economy and we've done this CARES Act funding, and I'm not arguing that shouldn't have been done. In fact, I think it should have been done. But it was a $1 trillion coronavirus stimulus package, and all that money is, whether it's business related or whether it's with the government agencies has to be gone by September 30th. That goes away. What happens then? If we don't have another $1 trillion to pump up the economy? It's going to be interesting. I'm going to take the last word on that when we come back. New York Attorney General is seeking to dissolve the NRA. We'll have that story in just a few minutes. Stay with us. So the New York Attorney General announced that he is seeking to dissolve the NRA in New York in a suit accusing that the gun rights group had a lot of fraud and self-dealing. Reggie, I read the article. I read several articles. While I don't know that I agree with dissolving the organization, it's not a pretty picture that's painted by the facts in this case.
No, it isn't. I think there's a little something for everything in there. You have a little politics in there. You have some self-dealing and mismanagement in there. And then you have the Second Amendment in there. So there's something for everybody in this. I just think it's unfortunate how the public's money is being used. And, Henry, as you said, it's not just this nonprofit. I mean, I think it's an issue with the model.
Yeah, and, it seems really, if we draw lines to where the problem is within the NRA, it all goes to Wayne LaPierre. Okay? Every time he had a chance to...
Theoretically.
But reading the way the article's set up and reading other sources, every time he had a chance to strengthen his position, he strengthens his position. He was playing Vegas and he was doubling down. Okay? And people who didn't agree with Wayne, they were out on the street. Okay? Good example, Oliver North. He could serve 2 terms. He resigned. He asked to do an independent financial audit of the NRA, and he got forced out of his position. There's a problem, okay? It's not just the NRA, as you alluded to, we talked off camera. It's not just the NRA. I think a lot of nonprofits have this very top-heavy. The NRA is in the crosshairs, okay, to use a gun term, only because it's so flagrant, and they're always out there. They are one of the strongest lobbying organizations in the world. They are always out there. They're always in the face, and they are a very, Second Amendment conservative position, which gives a lot of people who are opposed to the Second Amendment the opportunity to say, hey, look what these guys are doing.
Here's the problem for people that, and I'm a Second Amendment guy with some caveats. I don't think we need to have assault rifles. I don't think we need to have grenade launchers.
You're not Bazooka Joe?
I'm not.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I don't own a gun.
Okay.
But I'm not opposed to others having a gun if they use it for the purpose that it was intended, which is not holding up people or doing nefarious things. The problem is that this organization, this group that claims that their one purpose in living, in existing, is to protect gun rights in this country, some if not many are going to look at this and say, well, that's their secondary purpose. Their first purpose is to line their own pockets. And when you have a nonprofit that we entrust, because guess what, whether or not there's a problem more globally in nonprofits, there's no doubt in my mind that somebody's going to get a request to donate money to what may be a very valid nonprofit. And they're going to remember this and they're going to say, oh no, I know what you people do. And that's what bothers me. Because as a community, in Washington County specifically, we are a very giving community. If you look at some of the things the United Way has done, and we're actually going to have Heather Guestford on here in a week or so, actually next week. You look at some of the things that all of the nonprofits in our community have done, and they're amazing. And whether it's through a nonprofit or whether it's through people, the Community Foundation every year has a dinner for the unsung heroes, and they highlight 3 or 4 of them. There are probably 300 or 400 that you could highlight in any given year. And the fact that this is going to impede someone to give or to be a part of an organization that is truly trying to do good. That's what bothers me at its core.
You know, I think we need to look at, obviously what he makes is public knowledge. But when Ron was here, he always ordered, well, why are these large corporations paying out such high money? Big dollars to their CEOs. When you're a nonprofit, I think there needs to be some control at the top of, leading by example. Does he need a multi-million-dollar salary? Does he need to buy a 10,000 square foot home? And so he can have more security, which is, that was part of this article here that we read for the prep. It's all these things. It just stinks. I mean, it stinks. I think what the NRA needs to do is demand his resignation, do a clean house, do a full audit. I don't care if it's election season or it's not election season. I think they need to lead by example.
Dare I say they need to drain the swamp?
You can say however you want to say it. But the bottom line is there's something that stinks, okay, and whether it's in a swamp or it's driving through the oil fields going up in North Jersey, okay, something really stinks. And
Reggie, what say you?
In some of what I've read, some have tried to make it a stance against the Second Amendment. I don't see it that way. I see it as mismanagement of funds and dereliction of duty and not fulfilling their mission. And I agree, the organization needs to be gutted, whether they lose their nonprofit status or whatever that may be. But this is an unacceptable way of using public funds.
Well, and if this proves to be true, and these are allegations at this point, and there was there was part of the article that said they were asking the New York court to force Mr. LaPierre to repay the NRA for all of the things that were illegitimate expenses. I hope that happens. If indeed they are found to be
for them to earn the trust of the public again, they need a full restitution and open their books.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember, it's probably been 25 years ago now, the National United Way organization went through this at some level, and it was all about their CEO. And the problem is our local United Way, which at that point was under the direction of a guy named Jess Cagle, who is a legend in local United Ways. I mean, that good guy made sure that every penny that was donated to that organization went exactly where it was most needed. And the fact that we got put into the same group with this, National United Way that had these issues was very bothersome. And this is very bothersome as well.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do we need to say about that?
I think we pretty much beat it.
All right,
Okay.
stick a fork in him, he's done. When we come back, Fast Five. Stay with
Okay.
us. Welcome to Fast Five, where our three panelists talk about 5 topics in 7 short minutes. Let's get started. The city of Hagerstown is looking to extend free curbside parking for a little bit longer. Henry, what say you?
I think it's a great idea. Actually, I think they should designate certain spots on each block that where we have businesses that are pick up and go, designate a couple spots so people can get in, get out, and maybe encourage more traffic downtown.
So, Reggie, what do you think?
I agree with that. I think all the help that we can give to the businesses downtown should be done. I know that there's also some conversation in regards to blocking off the streets to have outdoor dining on the weekends. I think that's something that should be explored. I think that I think the city should do all it can to keep the momentum going of the growth downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did experience growth previous to this. I mean, I really was with the Maryland Theater Project. Obviously, that was the crown jewel. But with some of the restaurants that came in downtown, with Sir Uncle Stube doing a renovation and expansion, with 28 South and Bulls and Bears and all of the other things, I really think we were headed in the right direction. And I'd hate to see this impede that progress.
Absolutely.
Back just before the 2008 recession, there was a flurry of activity downtown, and there were a couple of investors that really put a lot of money in. And unfortunately, because of the economics, that happened upon them, that happened upon the country, I think they had some significant losses in some cases, and that's a shame, because I think they were trying to do the right thing. It was just at the wrong time. All right, Bill Brickner, former mayor, former city employee, passed away recently. Bill and I were in Kiwanis together for many years. Amazing guy. Did a lot for this community. Henry, what say you?
Do you know of an individual who had such knowledge about how the city worked and who to contact and what connections need to be made than Bill Brickner?
They're far and few between.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of the encyclopedia of how to get things done in Hagerstown. No offense to those who are active within the city of Hagerstown now, but he knew what department to call. He knew what things to deal with, and he kept, I think, a broad perspective, kind of even tempered and not quick to words, but he also, when he did say something, that was worth a hear.
Yeah. Reggie?
I never had the opportunity to meet him. Upon his passing, I was able to read comments from people around the community and see how beloved he was, and even down to his last days, how he was still worried about other projects and the underserved in the community. So I admire that.
All right, is it time to kill the penny? How many times have we heard this this argument come back around? Reggie, what are your thoughts on this? This looks like they're trying again. What did they say? It costs 2 cents to make every penny, and they're not made of copper anymore.
I'm nostalgic to the penny because of how many accumulated growing up to be able to buy the little candies and things that I want. But obviously, from an economic standpoint, it does not make a lot of sense in regards to making the penny. And with our current coin shortage, maybe this will push the needle on that in regards to getting rid of the penny.
Well, I think our current coin shortage was manufactured or not manufactured is the reason why we have that issue. My question is, okay, if we eliminate the penny, so what happens to the state 6% tax? Okay, that's 1 cent. So are we going to go from 5% to 10% next time? What are we going to do? Are we going to just round up and say, I mean, a lot of times you're at the store and say, well, it's 1996. So you give them that and you put the 4 cents in the need a penny, take a penny little box. But really, what are we going to do with that round change? How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with our tax base? I can tell you the people in Illinois don't want to see the penny gone, but that's been their argument for years.
And why? What is that argument?
Okay, but his face is on the $5 bill, so what's the big deal? The fact that it costs us twice as much, according to the government, to manufacture a penny than its value, makes you question why we are doing it. But there's a lot of things that the government does that really doesn't make a lot of sense. So can we pull the penny? Just figure out what we're going to do with our taxes and what we're going to do with rounding the money up. Is everything going to be based off a nickel from here on out?
Well, that's what they're suggesting, and they're also suggesting that basing it off the nickel, if you round up and round down, it all comes out about the same.
Who's going to round down?
Well, I think that's what you.
Who's going to round down?
Well,
you tell me Walmart's going to round down.
Yeah, I think they are.
Okay.
I think if they were charging $19.99 for something, they may charge $19.95 rather than $20, because from a marketing perspective, it makes more sense to do that. And I think, from the tax perspective, I think that's absolutely going to happen. It's going to round up or round down based on based on where you are. And, I can tell you, just when I'm doing back of the napkin math and it has cents on the back, and I always round up and round down, and I am amazed how many times it comes out to almost exactly the same.
Almost a net wash.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's a net wash, why wouldn't this be?
And if you're balancing your checkbook and you're off by 2 or 3 cents, are you going to really worry about going back through your checkbook for 2 or 3 cents?
Well, it depends on who you are. I probably would, because I'd argue there's a corresponding error.
Yeah.
And
that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, man.
Bank error.
Yeah. I was in banking at one point, and I remember several things where somebody said, well, I'm not going to look for that penny. And I said, oh, yes, you are, and we're glad they did. All right, and here's the what we call the WTF, or What the FlipSide segment for today. Elon Musk suggests that he's tweeting about a alien conspiracy theory. Henry, what's this all about?
Sometimes individuals just shouldn't have a Twitter feed. Okay? I mean, this is a good example. It's okay to think it, but don't put it down in writing because it kind of blew up. He's saying, oh, well, the aliens are the ones, because we still don't fully comprehend the engineering marvel that the Great Pyramids were and how they got the stones to the levels that they got the stones. So, I mean, there's a lot of theories out there. So we really don't. So the easiest thing to say is, okay, well,
aliens did it.
Mork came by.
Mork from Mork.
Mork from Mork came by, 6,000 years ago, and he levitated the stones, and that's how the pyramids got built.
What say you?
I put Elon Musk in a Kanye West bucket. Whatever they say is for entertainment purposes.
Okay, that's.
I know some people who would argue that with you.
All right. Last topic. Student's school suspension is revoked after her photo of a crowded hallway goes viral. This is about COVID and the fact that this student posted on social media, or maybe her mother did, about this crowded hallway and the fact that they weren't practicing or weren't able to practice social distancing. She was immediately, her name was Hannah Waters, she was immediately suspended from school. Then ABC News picked up the story, and lo and behold, the school had a change of heart and unsuspended her. But though I do think she spent a day or two out of the school. It's my understanding. Reggie, what say you?
I say that the school has bigger problems than Hannah. If you don't have a protocol in place to protect your faculty and students, I think that's where their concern should be.
Well, they had a policy in place. You're not supposed to share on social media things that could be detrimental or demeaning to
the school.
The school. Okay, well, that seems a little self-centered policy, but I imagine that a lot of schools have something like that. This was in Georgia, where they're actually going face-to-face classroom. And it was a crowded hallway, and she took a picture. A lot of the students weren't wearing masks.
Right.
Now, the repercussions is the school was, they said, well, we can't make the students. The superintendent went backwards on how he dealt with it. Well, we can't make the students wear the masks. Okay, well, you can at least make an effort.
Well, and I would argue they can make the students wear masks.
If you're going to attend class, then you are required to have a mask in.
Right.
Okay. Done. All right. It's just like if I go into a store and they say you must wear a mask to have service, I have to wear a mask. Okay. It doesn't matter that the government can't force me to wear the mask, but the store can choose whether to give me service or not. So there's that argument. But really, going with the suspension, I think that was kind of uncalled for. It should have been at least call the girl's parent and have a conversation, because she posted, the young lady posted it on her Twitter feed, and then it got picked up and it blew up into a national thing. It could have been handled a whole lot better, but hey.
How is the suspension justified here? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't see it. I mean, this is a public safety issue.
Well, it's a public safety issue.
But you made the school look bad, which is a violation of their articulated policy.
School's image is above public safety.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. That makes perfect sense to me. But in these times, maybe it does. I agree with you. I think they have far bigger problems. Number one being the safety of their students. Number two being just completely blind to what should be a priority.
But they didn't allow kids to have cell phones in schools. This wouldn't be an issue.
Well, that's true. I mean, this is almost like a whistleblower policy in my mind.
Yes.
This student is pointing out something that is a potentially dangerous situation, and she gets punished for it. What? There's a lawsuit waiting on this one. Trust me.
Let's hope not. But
I'm telling you, there is. Okay. That's all for Fast Five. When we come back, Maryland bankruptcies continue to climb during this pandemic. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Stay with us. So the pandemic has had some detrimental effects on Maryland businesses, and that's evidenced by the fact that bankruptcies have continued to climb during the pandemic. Reggie, what say you?
I say that I think the problem is going to get worse. I mean, obviously we're not opening up any faster. Some businesses that are hanging on, the PPP money will be running out. I think the issues is going to get worse. And if you're looking at it from an economic standpoint, from our state and beyond, you know, there's two factors to kind of us getting back to normal. That is economic activity and also unemployment going down. And most economists that I have been reading recently are saying that we're looking for those two to kind of normalize in 2023. So we have a bit more pain to go, in my opinion.
2023, that's a lot more pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Henry?
Well, I mean, Maryland is still very low on the bankruptcy chart, but we're also, a lot of our people are benefiting because we are, you know, right outside DC, and we have a lot of, you know, federal government jobs and such. But, you know, we're talking businesses and how that is impacting. It's going to get worse, as you're saying, because there's not money. We have, you know, a lot of businesses don't operate with, and unless you're on the Fortune 500, you're not operating with a huge bank account, okay? The mom and pops, you know, if they have a year's worth of reserve, they're doing fantastic. So you're sitting back and you've already spent 4 months of that, even with the PPP money, and you're working, you know, your fingers to the bone. How much are you going to keep putting in? It may be easier, you know, some might have a gracious exit and some might say, listen, I can't take any more of this debt. I'm going to avail myself of what the government has in place for us. I think it's going to get worse. It's unfortunate. I think that's going to play into what our unemployment numbers are going to be. We have businesses, the longer they stay closed, the less likely they're going to be to open. We said that earlier in the show. That's what we're facing. And that's why I think it's pertinent that we reopen balanced safety risks, but reopen as many businesses as we can and try to get things and people off the unemployment rolls and back to work. Is unemployment going to play a role? Yeah, it's going to play a role. We'll just have to deal with those issues. The bankruptcies are going to climb because businesses, they might start up and say, listen, I've enjoyed the last 6 months of not toiling away for, you know, 2 cents on a dollar. Maybe it's time for me to take a retirement. Okay, they may not reopen. They may work out something, or they may file bankruptcy and go back and work for somebody. But it's a
Well, the report from the Maryland Reporter said that there were more than 7,200 businesses that have filed for bankruptcy this year. Of those, 73% filed for Chapter 7, which is the basically liquidation type bankruptcy. 26%, or about 1,900, filed for Chapter 13, which is the payment reorganization. What does that tell us about the reasons for this bankruptcy, if these bankruptcies, if anything, or what does it tell us about where these entrepreneurs are at this point?
They're a desperation. I mean, they're walking away from businesses that they built and nurtured for many years.
But even with the Chapter 7, they could reorganize and come back, okay? The likelihood of success from a Chapter 7 for a mom and pop is not real strong, okay? Chapter 13 says they still want to have skin in the game.
Right.
But Chapter 7 says, listen, things are really dire. I don't see a way out of it. So it's going to be interesting, you know, all the mom and pops out there, and, you know, that's why I would, you know, encourage, if you can go out there and support a local mom and pop, even if they're not open and they offer a gift card or something along those lines. I know it's a risk to go out there and buy a $25, $50 gift card to a place that's not open. You're hoping they're going to reopen. But at the same point, it's a couple extra dollars that could maybe sustain them so they can possibly get back into the fray.
You know, whenever I was in banking and talking to the mortgage people, talking to the commercial loan people, They say there's three important things when you talk about opening a business, and those are location, location, and location. And interestingly, and you mentioned earlier that Maryland is kind of not hit as hard. In fact, we're 42nd on the list in terms of the number of bankruptcies we've had compared to other states. And some would suggest that that's because there are a lot of jobs in Maryland that are tied to the federal government, that are tied to the state government, that are tied to defense contracts, and that shields us in some ways. Reggie, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right in regards to it shielding us, but we also have to look at, there's a lot of jobs that just are not going to come back. And the underlying unemployment and the lingering effects of that. I know we've talked a lot about the economics, but there's a psychological effect of what that's having on families and business owners. I mean, to think if you've poured your life into a business and through circumstances not of your own doing, you're having to shut things down. It's a troubling trend.
Well, the other thing that's troubling is the fact, and this is a quote from National Federation of Independent Business State Chair Mike O'Halloran, who said that likely most of the businesses that filed for Chapter 7 were the small mom and pop shops. And those are the ones that really drive our economy across this state, across this United States. So it's going to be interesting. I hope your whatever you read, the prediction you saw about 2023 is wrong. But wow, I can see it. I mean, you look at how long we suffered from the 2008 recession.
Absolutely.
And I mean, this in my mind has the ability to be that plus. So we'll see what happens. That's all the time we have today. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com, most importantly. We hope you will join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.